Hare Krishna.
Hi everyone, I'm Shambhavi. I'm very excited to meet you guys. This is our first event of this semester. So looking forward to connecting with you. Today we're very honored to have His Holiness Rompat Swami with us here. His Holiness Rompat Swami is a spiritual leader with more than 50 years of monkhood experience. He embarked on his spiritual journey in 1969 after encountering His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's lecture through a college outreach program. He's played a pivotal role in establishing Krishna conscious student groups at esteemed universities such as MIT, Northwestern, and Illinois Tech. And he holds college outreach very dear and considers it as a form of giving back. For over 2 decades, he has visited our university to share profound spiritual wisdom, and it's a privilege we deeply appreciate. His core mission is to make his spiritual master's teachings accessible to all, offering practical methods for nurturing a relationship with God. So if you can all warmly welcome our really special speaker.
What's the theme this semester?
The spiritualist journey.
The spiritualists. So you're all spiritualists.
Trying to become.
Hi. You're not from America, but there's a American poet, Robert Frost. You heard his name? Two roads diverged in yellow wood. Sorry I could not travel both. But you can travel both. You can carry on with your everything you're doing and simultaneously put Krishna in the center. That's the spiritual journey. It's not like trying to cross a river with one foot in two different boats. It's to put both feet in one boat, and the boat is Krishna's at the center boat, and take that which you're doing, put Krishna at the center. That's the spiritual journey. Easier said than done, but that's what yoga is. Yoga is linking with the Supreme. That's the meaning. Linking, connecting. So connect whatever. So there's two things in creation, and not a third thing. There's the source, and there's that which comes from the source, and there's not a third thing. There's Krishna, and there's Krishnas, and there's not a third thing. Everything has a connection with the source. So yoga is to connect things with the source. And that system or science is yoga. Yoga is more than asanas. Yoga is consciousness evolving. It's a spiritual journey, which each of us is going to experience and take part in a different way. What I did was a little different than probably what all or most of you are going to do, but that's okay. The journey is the journey. It's customized. But stay connected with the principle, and you get there. So the theme, the extraordinary journey, just happened to coincide with your theme. And it happened to also coincide with what we experienced yesterday. Yesterday, all around the world, I mean, London, China, all around the world. Yesterday was observing the appearance day of our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. With pictures on the back of Bhagavad Gita, and we have a box of Bhagavad Gitas for those of you that want a Bhagavad Gita, if you don't already have one. And this, the photo here is a photo of a cargo ship. The cargo ship is one of many of Scindia Steamline Limited, owned by Sumati Morarji in Bombay, and she gave passage on her cargo ship named Javaduta. So you're all from India, so you know what Javaduta means. Water swan. Javaduta. Nice name for a boat. And somewhere in this Javaduta cargo ship, there was a cabin for a passenger besides the staff that, work on the steamship. So, the subtitle somehow there's a problem with the screen. Anyway, what it says at the bottom is one man's journey into a million hearts. I like the subtitle. And with this, I like the extraordinary journey. It's dedicated to our founder Acharya. Here's a photograph of him. And the beginning of his journey was on a rooftop in Calcutta. Well, actually, it started before then. He was my spiritual master's birth name was Abai Day. Abai Day from Calcutta. His father was a Vaishnava, and his father was a pious Vaishnava, meaning in addition to what he did in his home, he had a practice of purposefully inviting sadhus to come to his home whenever he could find a sadhu or whenever someone would pass through. And some of them weren't really sadhus, but they were dressed in nice color. And so he invited them to his home and honored them in the customary way of honoring a sadhu, and made a request each time the sadhu would come. Please bless my son that he becomes a nice devotee. And he specifically said, a devotee of Radharani. Devotee of Krishna, devotee of Radharani. And sadhu after sadhu, and that was what my spiritual master grew up with, a pious Vaishnava dedicated to his son, that his son should become a nice devotee. And time passed, and like many young people, he became a college student. And he got married while he was still in college. And a friend of his said, come with me, I'd like you to meet a sadhu. He said, oh, I've met so many sadhus. No, this one's different. He's genuine. I know you have a thing about disgenuine sadhus, but I promise you. So with the persuasion of his friend, he went. And the meeting place was a rooftop in a building in Calcutta. And this is a painting of that meeting. There's another one too. And there's some of Bhakti Siddhanta's, that was his spiritual master to be. There's some of his brahmachari associates, and then some other people. And Abai, when he came before Bhakti Siddhanta, he was carrying himself like an educated young man. So as you see down in the lower corner, this was what's the date? It was 1922. So these dates are important. He's a young man in college, married, no children yet, 25 years old. And the first meeting, first time, he's offering his respect, and as he's offering his respect, Bhaktisiddhanta said, "You're an educated young man, why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message throughout the whole world?" So, no introductions, just like very direct. And at that time, 1922, was at the peak of the non-violent, non-cooperation movement of Gandhi in India. And Abai was not only a member, but he was a leader in the Gandhi movement. And so he said, "Who will hear your Chaitanya's message?" This is cut and paste from the biography about Prabhupada. "We are a dependent country. First, India must become independent. How can we spread Indian culture if we are under British rule? Who's going to pay attention? We're just subordinates, so we have to become free first." And the replied in a deep, quiet voice, spoke for 20 minutes, little exchange, 20-minute explanation. Why you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for a change in Indian politics, nor is it dependent on who ruled. Krishna consciousness was so important, so exclusively important, that it could not wait. Here's some of the words, again, taken from this biography. Whether one power or another rule is a temporary situation, but the eternal reality is Krishna consciousness, and the real self is the spirit soul. No man-made political system, therefore, could actually help humanity. This was the verdict of reading scriptures and the line of spiritual masters, although everyone is an eternal servant of God. When one takes himself to be the temporary body and regards the nation of his birth as worshipable, he comes under illusion. The leaders and followers of the world's political movements, including the movement of Swaraj, were simply cultivating this illusion. Now this is supposed to be different colors so you can see it, but it's dark. Anyway, real welfare work, whether individual, social, or political, should help prepare a person for his next life and help him reestablish his eternal relationship with the Supreme. This is paraphrasing parts of a 20-minute monologue in response to the query. We have to say, first thing first, get Swaraj, and then people will respect whatever we have to say. And while we're subordinate, who's going to pay attention to this message? He became convinced. And he took part in his organization, and that was 1922. And some years later, let's see if we have the year. No. He received initiation, I think it was 1935. No mistake. So, in Allahabad, he took formal initiation. His spiritual master gave him the name Abai Charan, from Abai to Abai Charan. And then later, when he took sannyas, he was given a title AC, or Abai Charan, Bhakti Vedanta. That's what we know. AC, Bhaktivedanta Swami. So, Abhay Charan, it's customary during the time of Bhaktisiddhanta and present time for someone that wishes to receive Diksha. The conventional sense of Diksha is Gayatri mantras. Diksha mantra. Bhaktisiddhanta blended uniquely the Pancharatrika system with the Agama system. The Pancharatrika system says that when one chants the holy name of Hari, one may receive Diksha in the chanting of the holy name of Hari, or the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And prior to that, some examination period where the guru examines the student examines the guru, and then there's a formal Diksha, Harinam Diksha. And then after some time of purification from Harinam and the chanting after Diksha comes Gayatri Diksha, or Brahminical mantras. And so, uniquely, it's a detail, but Bhaktisiddhanta somewhat respected the qualification of Abhay and Abhay Charan, that he gave him the second initiation at the same time. 1933, here we go. So 22, in 1922 he was 25. So if I do the math right, you add 11 to 22, and he's now 36. By this time he has children. And so it's 33, excuse me. In 1935, this is a painting of some time that Abhay, who's one of his sons, spent with his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta in Vrindavan. It's still a current practice, but at that time, Bhaktisiddhanta, during the Kartik month, would take people to holy places, particularly to Vrindavan, and a whole group of followers and friends and people would go to different holy places in Vrindavan. And then in the evening, he would give a lecture, and the evening, some persons would just go see the holy places. So Abhay spent time with his spiritual master, hearing his lectures, and he said, my brain is puzzled, because he spoke very high. My brain is puzzled when I read his books, but I'm attracted not because his speech is puzzling, but because it's pure. I'll tell a little story. I met my spiritual master in the university that I attended. And when he spoke to the university students, he spoke very simply, so I could understand it. Some detail, but the first Krishna conscious literature that I received was a magazine called Back to Godhead. We'll hear about this in a while. When Prabhupada was a household, he had left his household life and entered Vanaprastha stage. He started a magazine, called it Back to Godhead. The title Back to Godhead was taken from a verse by Rupa Goswami saying, that's the mission of human life, is return to our original position in relationship with the source, in the spiritual world, Back to Godhead. So he had a publication, Back to Godhead. And when he traveled to America, it stopped because he didn't have the resources. And then when he had the resources, he started again. So when I became a college kid, I received a copy. The person who gave me a copy was a friend. I didn't know what it was. He just said, hey, here's one of these. So I was carrying around this Back to Godhead magazine along with my clipboard and stack of books. And somebody saw the Back to Godhead magazine. They pointed to it and said, oh no, you're not into that, are you? I said, what do you mean, that? what's that? That struck my curiosity, so I started to read the magazine. And the feature article in the magazine is an article by Bhaktisiddhanta. The title of the article, published in his Bhaktivedanta magazine, 1969, was "The Bhagavat is Ontology and Morphology." And I was just, a college kid that didn't know any Sanskrit or anything. They had to look up the meaning of the title, 3 words in the title. And I was curious, so then I read the whole article. It took me 3 hours to read the whole article. I did the college thing, circled things, underlined things, looked things in dictionary, wrote in the margin, this means this. When it was all done, I reached 3 hours. I timed this flew. I didn't know where I was. It was just one of those timeless experiences. And when I ended, I sat back and said, I don't know what I read. And the other thing was, I don't understand what I read. And the other thing was, I have been brought to a place of consciousness that I've never experienced before. Just by reading his inimitable, elevated, English wasn't his primary language. And English is my primary language. And I'm a college kid and, pre-med, and, I know how to understand stuff that's hard to understand. Anyway, it wasn't just the language. It was his consciousness. And it was conveyed through his writing. So I've had, and still have, the highest regard. I didn't have that meeting on a rooftop in Calcutta, and et cetera, but I have very high regard for, of course, my spiritual master and his spiritual master. So they're in Vrindavan. Some of you have been to Vrindavan, perhaps, or you'll go there one day. And one of the very, very special places in Vrindavan is Radhakund Shamakund. It's at the north end of Govardhan Hill. Govardhan Hill is a very special place. And special amongst the special places is Radhakund Shamakund. They're walking around Radhakund. And Bhaktisiddhanta, in a conversation, so he's gotten one instruction, go to the west and give this message of Lord Chaitanya. Here comes instruction number 2. Here's the Bengali. Amar icha chila kichu bhai karana. I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books. Standing by Radhakunda, beholding his spiritual master, Bhai felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books. So this is 1935, 2 years after he's 36, so he's now 37, 38. He's 38 with a family. 1935. I am fully confident. So this is the same photograph, but it's sometime 3 years later. No, 1 year later. It's the last instruction that he received. So he's a householder, busy with his business and busy with his family, doing some writing, trying to be a faithful instrument of Bhaktisiddhanta, so he wrote him a letter. Bhaktisiddhanta at this time was in Puri, and December 36, he wrote a letter saying, I'm a householder, you have so many sannyasi, disciples, who can do so much service, what can I do for you? Blank slate. He got a letter. But a few days, like about 10 days before Bhaktisiddhanta left this world, was his final instruction, with the same as the initial instruction. I'm fully confident that you can explain. Where's the microphone? Okay. I'm fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to people who are not conversant with the languages of the other members. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings in the people in general, as well as philosophers and religionists. So that's December 1936. So now we're, how old is he? 38? Something like that? 38. So think about your age and think about his age and what he's been through. And he's getting this firm instruction. And shortly thereafter, Bhaktisiddhanta left the world. So what are you going to do when you get these two very powerful, one of them repeated instruction that's like your life mission? You dedicate yourself to that life mission. Srila Prabhupada took both of these instructions as his life's mission. A period of deep reflection and study followed Srila Prabhupada's meeting with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Prabhupada greatly revered this scholarly spiritual teacher and read his writings assiduously. So up here, it shows his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta, and here it shows his father and guru in our disciplic line named Bhakti-Vinod. Bhaktisiddhanta Bhakti-Vinod. So he also read Bhakti-Vinod's teachings. The life and works of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's father, Srila Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, also revealed much to Srila Prabhupada about the spiritual heritage of Krishna consciousness and helped inspire him to propagate the science of devotional service through the English language. So he had already demonstrated acumen in terms of his writing ability and speaking ability. I didn't include all that history, but he was already recognized as a very gifted writer. There's details which he was recognized as a gifted writer in the English language. And that was, so Bhaktisiddhanta's mission was Lord Chaitanya's mission, and he imbibed it from his father, Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, who imbibed it from disciplic succession, and it was the message of Lord Chaitanya was for the world, not just India, but for the world, because the message is of the soul and of the Supreme, who's the source of everything. And so his predecessor teachers, acharyas, wanted this to go into the world. And since at that time, English language was becoming more prominent and more prominent and more prominent, do it in the English language. That was the mandate coming down. And so he carried it in his heart and prepared himself. The business that he had was a pharmaceutical business. And at a certain point in time, here we have the year, 1953, he retired from his business life. He entered into the vanaprastha stage. He left household life and leaving the business with his elderly sons, old enough and knew how to run the business, to look after themselves, look after his wife, and he entered vanaprastha stage of life. And when he entered vanaprastha stage of life, at the age of 57, he went to Vrindavan. This is a photograph of Keshigat along the bank of the river Jamuna. And where he stayed was a little place. Now he's 60 years. For 2 years, he traveled about here and there and did things. He ended up in Vrindavan. The place where he stayed from 1956 to 62 was a little tiny room in a place that was called Vangshi Gopal Temple. Now, Vangshi Gopal Temple, just to give you a picture of, he went through austerities. It was a family's home, but it was an ancestral home where the ancestral family had enough wealth that they established a deity in their home. It was really their home. But they called it Vangshi Gopal Temple. And he had a room up on the upper floor, and for 6 years he stayed there. Here's the deities of Radha, Vangshi, Gopal. Nice little deities. And I don't have a photograph. Elsewhere, I have a photograph of the room that he stayed in. The room that he stayed in, you know, you're from India. Most all of you are from India. So it was one of those stark rooms, you know, 3 foot thick walls with windows in the back, but no running water, no toilet, no kitchen, no nothing. Just a room, 10 feet wide, no, 7 feet wide, 10 foot tall ceilings, and 12 feet long room. 12 by 10 and 10 foot tall ceiling. And that's where he stayed for 6 years. He's in the Vanaprastha stage. While he was in the Vanaprastha stage, he was encouraged by a godbrother that he should accept sannyas. And so he accepted sannyas. Why? Prabhupada wrote, I was unwilling, but his godbrother pictured here the mandate that was given to Abhay Charan or A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So you should take sannyas. You got this world mission. World mission. You should be a sannyasi. It'll assist you in doing that service. So I was sitting alone in Vrindavan writing. My godbrother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. He insisted. Not he insisted. Practically, my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher, so he forced me. So this godbrother, you accept. So unwillingly. Now the unwillingly was humility. He had already bought into the mission. You know, the service that was given to him was a life's mission. We had a discussion the other day about Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Some of you are nodding your heads. You know what that one is. So one of the 7 is begin with the end in mind. He didn't have to figure it out. He was told twice, this is your life mission. That would make it simple. And he wasn't feeling qualified. I mean, it's mission impossible, life mission. I'm not qualified. So he was feeling like that. He bought into the mission, but anyway, so he yielded with the understanding that it was his part of his spiritual master's order through his godbrother. So he took sannyas in 1959. So 1959, he is nearly 60. And part of one of the things he did was he had begun, while he was living in Vrindavan at Vangsi Gopal Temple, he had begun a magazine, Back to Godhead magazine, English Back to Godhead magazine, on spiritual topics, which was for 3 reasons. One, to practice his writing skills. He was a gifted writer. Everyone knew it. He accepted. I should do this as a service. And another was to go around with his magazine and practice his preaching with people to, help them, encourage them to take the magazine, because this is India in the 30s, and what do people want about, they want to become like England. Oh, he went into Delhi. Here's a photograph, a painting. He's at tea stalls talking to people about Back to Godhead magazine. A third reason was, by this method, he could meet people who later, pious people with means, could help him with his mission. Because he's a sannyasi. He doesn't have a bank account. He doesn't have a business. He doesn't have supporters. He doesn't have anything. He's got a mission. So he may meet some people. So that was one of the things that he did. And it happened. You'll see shortly. Here's one of the places he stayed in the 50s, where while distributing Back to Godhead magazine, he stayed at Chippiwada, and he also then began to translate Srimad Bhagavatam. for those of you that came a little bit later, there's copies of Bhagavad Gita for anybody that wants one. Yes? They're gift copies. Just say, raise your hand, and when it comes time, something will fall in your hand. Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavatam is speaking about Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavat Purana, about Bhagavan. He was follower of his spiritual master. Here's a little history. His spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta, had two sannyasis go to England to take the message of Lord Chaitanya to England, because this was during, the Swaraj period. So England was the ruling country of India. So many people looked up to India, like it or not. Some people liked it. So he sent them to India. But before they went to India, they carried with them a book. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, the title of the book, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, thick, really thick book, written by a professor in Cuttack University, who was a disciple, Professor Sanyal, who wrote the book in English, high language again. And so, because if you're going to go to England to give the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, you'd better have a book. So it was delayed until the book was published and available, so he could take copies with them to England. Now, being a follower, he also wanted to take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which are the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. A equals B, B equals C. So A equals C. The teachings of Lord Chaitanya are the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. The teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam are the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So he was working on Canto 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam in English with extensive commentary, and it was to be in 3 volumes. Each volume was 450 pages times 3. And he wanted to carry that with him. You'll hear about it shortly when he's getting on this boat, the Jaladuta. And when it was done, when the first 3 volumes of Canto 1 were done, when the first 3 volumes of Canto 1 were done, that was the signal, time to go. There are a few other things that had to be put into place, which you'll hear about shortly. This is the improbable journey for those of you that came late. The improbable journey, the journey of one soul into the hearts of millions of souls. That's the subtitle. Okay, so he's in Delhi beginning his writing of Srimad Bhagavatam commentary, translation and commentary. And while he was at this Vangsi Gopal temple with a really small room, the head, the leading Goswami of the Radha Damodar temple, some of you have been to Vrindavan, you know where the Radha Damodar temple is, celebrated place now. Then it was not so visited. Anyway, he received an invitation from the Goswami in charge of the Radha Damodar temple. Please come stay here at the Radha Damodar temple. Why? You'll get the mercy of Sri Sri Radha Damodar, which were the deities that were worshipped by Jiva Goswami 450 years before, and still being worshipped on the altar today. And it's the samadhi of Rupa Goswami, one of the foremost followers of Lord Chaitanya. And through his mercy, your mission to take the message of Lord Chaitanya to the West will be blessed by Rupa Goswami. So he thought about it. He went and looked at there were 2 rooms on the ground floor, literally they're right in the courtyard of the main temple. They were run down. They needed repair. He didn't have money to repair them, just to make them habitable. And the place was muddy and unclean, and but he felt the mercy of Rupa Goswami, and so he accepted. It took a month, 500 rupees to fix up the rooms so they were habitable, and he moved in. There's one of the rooms there were two little rooms. There's, similar in size to the room that he was in before. And here's the other room, but where he had some water available, like a tap. And so he used the tap to do his own cooking, little kerosene cooker. And here's a little table looking out the window. What he was seeing as he was taking his meals was the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. And on this side is the Bhajan Kutir of Rupa Goswami. So this is the courtyard, what it looked like then. When you go there today, you won't see it because it's there, but they have structures and structures and structures. But it was very simple at that time. And nearby, and because rooms are stacked on top of rooms on top of rooms in villages like Vrindavan, or town, I should say. One Babaji, his name was Hridayananda Babaji, who was, from Radhakund, a Brahmana Babaji. He heard in the middle of the night many times someone crying and chanting loudly and calling out, "Hey Rupa, hey Sanatana, hey Gurudev, please give me your mercy. Without your mercy, I cannot do anything. Give me the mercy. Give me the strength that I may fulfill your orders." And chanting loudly and crying. And this Babaji didn't know what that was. And it would happen regularly, from midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. So one night, he was interviewed later, and he said, "I've lived in Vrindavan for 78 years. I've met many sadhakas and holy men, and I've never seen anyone that had sadhana like your spiritual master. One evening, it was a full moon night, I went on the rooftop to see what's that voice. Because it was full moon, I could see. There's no street lights or lamps or anything like that. And there he saw Abhay Charan Bhaktivedanta on his hands and knees with one of those little brooms, sweeping in front of the samadhi of Rupa Goswami, calling for mercy. Because he had a mandate, but he didn't feel himself qualified. Mission impossible. How are you going to do a mission impossible? He didn't have any resource, didn't have any money. To print these books little by little, because he was going to Delhi and here and there and meeting people as a sannyasi. People little by little assisted him in publication costs. So the message here is there's qualification, but a lot of appeal for mercy. This is a picture of the person who made this incredible journey or unlikely journey. So there was in the course of his visits in Delhi, he met a Mr. Agrawal who confided in Srila Prabhupada that my son went to America for his studies. When he studied, he wanted to stay in America. He got married to an American lady, and I'm worried about my son. Dad worried about his son. Can you help me? And Prabhupada did the quick math. 2 + 2 = 4. So he said, sure, I can help. Give me his phone, give me his postal address. So Prabhupada wrote to Gopal Agrawal. That's Gopal Agrawal in his much later years of life. And he wrote to Gopal, your father gave me your contact information. I'd like to visit you. Can you send me a letter of invitation? Because he's married to an American lady. He now has American citizenship. With his American citizenship, he could send him an invitation letter for a tourist visa. 2 + 2 = 4. And so Prabhupada wrote to him, and he gave an invitation letter. And with his invitation letter, he got a visa. Now he doesn't have he had to get a passport because he didn't have a passport. So he got a passport, got a visa, and now comes the next. How's he going to get to America? It's part of the Krishna's unfolding plan, right? So one of the persons who he met while visiting in Bombay was a lady named Sumati Morarji. Sumati Morarji was a part of a disciplic line other than Prabhupada's. She was a worshiper of Srinathji, a Vallabha follower. But, she had a love for Krishna, and she knew that Prabhupada had love for Krishna. So Prabhupada made her a request. Can you give me passage on one of your cargo ships to America? And she tried to dissuade him. Swamiji, you're so old, this reason, that reason. What are you going to do there? Suppose you got there. You might die crossing the ocean. You know how rough it is? She gave reason after reason. You don't have any resource. What are you going to do? Where are you going to stay? How are you going to eat? How are you going to do this mission impossible? But he was insistent, and so she yielded, and she gave him the improbable journey passage on a steamship, because she owned a steamship line, Scindia Steamship Limited. So here's a little, later, there was a little interview, and I hope the technology works. I did a test run.
He said that he would like to go to America. I was surprised. I said, Swamiji, don't go there. You are too old to go. And it will be too cold for you. I said, are you crazy? The old man, you are going to die. Who will look after you? What will you do then? Still he insisted. So I said, all right. So I made arrangement for him to go by Jalapita.
So we're talking with Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta. Hello, Swamiji? Yes. What is the perfection of this life? The perfection of this life is to understand oneself. This is the beginning. Why I am suffering. If there is any solution of this suffering, so know yourself. Yes. Know yourself.
That's a radio interview with New York Post once he had reached New York and things started to happen, and it kept his message really simple. Here's another nice story. Well, we'll get there. There's many nice stories. Okay, so there's his passport. There's the indication of his visa. And he started keeping what was later known as the Jaladutta diary. He was very meticulous. He kept personal notes in his own handwriting. Mostly it was in English, sometimes in Bengali. And it started Sunday, August 1st, 65. So he went to Calcutta from Bombay, which is where he got all his documentation, and it shows here's his travel. When he went to Calcutta. There's a picture of Calcutta in those days, and he stayed at a particular Dharmshala, and he stayed there for a while, and he took blessings from Govinda Maharaj, one of Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples, and so you can see just details. He went to the headquarters of Bhaktisiddhanta to pay his respects. Chaitanya Gaudiya Math at his headquarters. There's his murti, prayed, chanted, begged for his mercy, and then he went to another place in Mayapur, because his headquarters was in Mayapur also, it's in West Bengal. This is the place of Advaita Acharya, where a little nice story. This is regularly he would come to this place and chant, and same three things: chant, cry, and pray to Advaita Acharya for his mercy to be successful in the mission that he was given by Bhaktisiddhanta. Many years later, like, 6 years later, there was ISKCON devotee from America that went to Mayapur. And the Pujari was given a copy of the Back to Godhead magazine. He saw the picture of Prabhupada on the cover of the Back to Godhead magazine. He said, I know that sadhu. He's the same one that used to come here and cry and chant and pray for Advaita Acharya's mercy. Now I put two and two together. It's the same person. He got mercy. But he got it because he was in two things. He was instructed and he was qualified. He was instructed because he was qualified, and he got lots of mercy because he was eager to get mercy. It's an important feature. So now he's going to go to the King George's stockyard in Calcutta and get on board the ship. Here's a newspaper from Calcutta where a little story is. This is the newspaper clipping in Bengali. But what it says over here on this side is, with Prabhupada's picture, that he got on board a ship to go to America to take the teaching of Lord Chaitanya to the West. So here we are. It's Tuesday, the 12th of August. He's getting on board the ship. He kept records. Here's the record of his seat on that ship, the Jaladuta. There it is, the Jaladuta. There he goes, getting on the ship. He had three possessions: a suitcase, an umbrella, and his bead bag. He's a sannyasi. He didn't have, he had a passport and visa, but he didn't have anybody. He didn't have any, I don't know anyone. I don't know how to do what he did. With warning, you're risking your life, what are you going to do, and so forth. But that's all he had. So here's a cut and paste. He had this flyer made because how was he going to maintain himself once he got there? In addition to the book that was the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, it was his means to maintain himself when he got there. So while in India, he printed this one-page flyer, Srimad Bhagavatam, India's message of peace and goodwill. All over the world for scientific knowledge of God. That's his message. So his idea was, when he got to America, that's how he would maintain himself, somehow. Selling Bhagavatam to people that didn't know what Bhagavatam was. In English. Printed in India. So here's some nice text. Should I read the text? I'll read the text. When the day came for him to leave, he needed that confidence. He was making a momentous break with his previous life, and he was dangerously old and not in strong health, and he was going to an unknown and probably unwelcoming country. To be poor and unknown in India was one thing, even in these Kali Yuga days when Indian leaders were rejecting Vedic culture and imitating the West, it was still India. It was still the remains of Vedic civilization. He'd be able to see millionaires, governors, and prime ministers simply by showing up at their doors and waiting. A sannyasi was respected, and Srimad Bhagavatam was respected. But in America, it'd be different. He'll be no one, a foreigner. And there's no tradition of sadhus, no temples, no ashrams. But when he thought of the books he was bringing, transcendental knowledge in English, he became confident. When he met someone in America, he would give him a flyer. That's this. So in a little while, we're going to see Sally Agarwal, who is Gopal Agarwal's American wife, holding a little flyer because he went to their home in Butler, Pennsylvania. Where's Butler, Pennsylvania? You ever heard of that place? A little small place in the middle of Pennsylvania. That's where he stayed for a little while because he had a tourist invitation to visit Gopal. So here's the Jaladuta, his diary, the Jaladuta diary excerpt. Today, the captain arranged for a meeting on board the Jaladuta. On account of Janmashtami Day, I spoke for an hour on the philosophy and teachings of Lord Sri Krishna. All the officers attended the meeting and there was distribution of prasadam. The matter was radiographed to Srimati Morarji in Bombay. The ship is stranded on the Arabian Sea, about 4 miles away from the coast. We are in this position for quite a while. 3 p.m. one day till something a.m. the next day. 2 days later, excuse me. So he says, this is... Now, in Cochin, they loaded the Bhagavatams. It wasn't where he got on in Calcutta, but where Cochin is, it's southern port. And so they loaded the books there. And you saw them coming on the ship. Because it's a cargo ship. They were equipped to do it. Now, his mission is moving forward. The improbable journey. So, on an Ekadasi day, we started towards the Red Sea. There's the Red Sea up here. On the Western Front, the sky was almost clear, and there was sunshine. Since the starting of the trip from Cochin Port, we are floating now on the Arabian Sea. My seasickness again began, headache, vomiting, tendency, no hunger, dizziness, no energy to work. It is continuing. There's sometimes showers of rain, but for a short time, there was a fellow passenger in my cabin. He is also attacked with seasickness. He's an elder gentleman with health. Wasn't good when he started, and I haven't crossed the ocean in a ship, but seasickness apparently is a common thing, vomiting, dizziness. And not only that, he had 2 heart attacks. And so these are in his diary. He just, the days that passed when he couldn't write anything because he was convalescing from heart attacks. One evening, Prabhupada disclosed this, what you see here, how he had come to America and suffered 2 heart attacks at sea. They say that anyone who gets a 3rd heart attack, they must expire. I had 2 attacks on the ship. Later, about almost a year after he had been in America, he had a 3rd heart attack in New York City. And that he was partially paralyzed. Left side was paralyzed. I do not know how I was saved. And one girl, that captain's wife, she studied astrology. She said, Swamiji, if you can survive your 70th year, then you'll live for 100 years. So what happened, this is a painting, but Krishna came, placed his hand on Prabhupada's chest and said, carry on, I'm with you. You'll be successful. In other words, he survived, he understood. You're going to have anyway, he had something like this happen. He's a very qualified person. Through difficulty, but protected personally by Krishna. Then he had a dream. And in the dream, this is a painting of the dream. Krishna and various sages are rowing a boat and making sure that he crosses. So there's the Suez Canal, there's the Mediterranean Sea, and they're making their passage onward through the Straits of Gibraltar out into the rough Atlantic Ocean. So there's the Atlantic Ocean. He's crossing to Boston. That's the first stop. Today the ship is plying very smoothly. I feel better today, but I'm feeling separation from Sri Vrindavan and my Lord Sri Govinda Gopinath Radha Damodar. This is his entry into his diary. The only solace is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which I am tasting the nectarine of Lord Chaitanya's Leela. I have left Bharat Bhumi just to execute the order of Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati in pursuance of Lord Chaitanya's order. I have no qualification, but I have taken up the risk just to carry out the order of His divine grace. I depend fully on their mercy, so far away from Vrindavan. In his diary. Monday, 32nd day of our journey from Calcutta. After midnight yesterday, the lurching decreased, and I felt relief. In the morning also, I could not take breakfast properly. He cooked. It was nice. Today, I have disclosed my mind to my companion, Lord Sri Krishna. There's a Bengali poem made by me today in this connection. At about 11, there is a little lurching. The captain tells that they have never had such calmness of the Atlantic. I said, it is Lord Krishna's mercy. His wife asked me to come back with them. So they get a nice crossing by your presence. If Atlantic would have shown its usual face, perhaps I would have died. But Lord Krishna has taken charge of the ship. So, because of time, I'm not going to go into it. But somebody, Yasodhanandana, maybe you can make a copy of the poem that Prabhupada wrote. He's in the Boston Harbor, and it's really beautiful, but, it's taking too long. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful poem. A poem to Krishna saying, you brought me here. I don't know why you brought me here, but there must be some reason that you brought me here. This place is filled with the lower modes of nature. How are they going to understand transcendental knowledge? But if you brought me here, you can make me fulfill the purpose of my name, Bhakti Vedanta. Make me dance as you like. It's a very nice poem. So here's the words of the poem, but I'm going to skip it. Later, Prabhupada went back to the pier in Boston, where he wrote this poem in September 1965. There's the poem in the Bengali and English. Here's the last line. I have no devotion, nor do I have any knowledge, but I have strong faith in the holy name of Krishna. I've been designated as Bhaktivedanta, and now, if you like, you can fulfill the real purport of Bhaktivedanta. So he arrived in the Boston Harbor. They stayed for about a day and a half. An immigration man came on the boat and asked him, let me see your documents. How long do you plan to stay? The invitation was for 1 year, so he said 1 year. And he was thinking, he shared later, what am I going to do for more than 1 year? What am I going to do? Excuse me, not 1 year, 1 month. 1 month. And then he extended up to 1 year, and then they refused him. But that's when he had his heart attack, and he had to go, third heart attack, and had to go back to India to convalesce. So when he got, this is showing he was coming off the gangplank in New York City, and he said, when I got to the end, there's his suitcase, his umbrella, and his bead bag, and New York City's not a friendly place. What to do? What would you do? He said, I didn't know whether to turn left or right. He went to Port Authority, got on a bus, went to Butler, Pennsylvania. And Gopal Agrawal was receiving him at the bus station in Butler, Pennsylvania. So for a while, he stayed in Butler, Pennsylvania, which is in mid-Pennsylvania. There's this young boy bridge. They had a son. And there's Sally Agrawal holding this flyer that Prabhupada gave her a copy. So they purchased a set of Srimad Bhagavatam, 3 volumes, Canto 1. That was his means of maintenance. When he was staying in Butler, Pennsylvania, he stayed at a YMCA, a little room. And here's the little room where he stayed. And he stayed there for almost a month. Then he took a visa extension, and he went to New York City. Now, where is he going to go in New York City? Because he doesn't live in New York City. It's not a friendly place. When he was in India, one of the friends, he asked, do you have any acquaintances in America? He said, yes. A friend of mine, Dr. Mishra, lives in New York City. So he wrote to Dr. Mishra and said, if I come to New York, may I be able to stay with you? He said, yes. So Dr. Mishra had an apartment on 72nd Street in Manhattan, but there wasn't room in his apartment, so he gave him an office room with no windows, no water, no toilet, no kitchen, a door in an office room. So he in the mornings, in the winter, with his, coat, walked down the street to his apartment, used his toilet, used his kitchen, took his bath, and, went on like that for some time, just, hand to mouth. Now, Dr. Mishra was a yoga teacher, among other things. And so he had a place where he taught yoga in upstate New York, above New York City. So from time to time, Prabhupada would go there. And later, Dr. Mishra was interviewed and said, he was so kind to me. He was such a perfect gentleman. He had nothing but kindness to say about Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was very appreciative because he gave him this little office room to stay in. Things happened, unfolded slowly, painfully slowly. He had no money other than what he could sell Bhagavatams, and how was he going to do that? So, but, little by little. Then a few American people, a fellow named Carl and a fellow named something, they got it together to get him shared space in a loft. A loft is a nice word for like an abandoned space that nobody uses, and they call it a loft. So he was sharing with a drug addict. The drug addict went crazy and broke into the little space where Prabhupada was and stole his Bhagavad Gita, unpublished Bhagavad Gita manuscript, and his typewriter. The typewriter was one of those little manual ones. Clink, clink, He stole the typewriter and stole his manuscript. Now, what's a crazy man going to do with the book? So Prabhupada had to do the Bhagavad Gita manuscript over again. There was enough sentiment that eventually they arranged a room for Prabhupada, like a normal room. This is after 1 year of living in uninhabitable places. So a habitable place that had a little kitchen and a little toilet and a little shower and a little space and a little storefront. And the little storefront had been previously, was now unoccupied, but a gift shop called Matchless Gifts. So they left the Matchless Gifts sign. There's a painting in the front window, painting of Lord Chaitanya. And here's some young people coming in to attend Prabhupada's classes, 3 days of the week, Bhagavad Gita class, and Kirtan and Prasadam. And eventually they said, hey, this is so nice. The popularity of the Kirtan grew. So some of the members said, can we take this outside? It's so nice. Prabhupada said, yes, but you have to get a permit. So they got a permit for Tompkins Square Park, which is in the Lower East Side. And this is a photograph of the first day they went there. This is an oak tree. This is the celebrated landmark in New York. It's a church steeple. And there's a big crowd of people that are wondering, who's this guy? There's a celebrated thing that he said. I wasn't there, but I was told by somebody that was there. Prabhupada stood up after 3 hours of chanting, and his first message, little drum roll and trumpet, imagine you're a world acharya in the making, and you have your first chance to speak to a public assembly. What are you going to say? Here's what he said. I've not come to teach something new. I've simply come to remind you of what you have forgotten. Cool, huh? I'll say it again. I've not come to teach you something new. I've come to remind you of what you have forgotten. Then Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. You're not the body, we're spirit, soul, and simple. And then distributed prasadam. And that's how the Hare Krishna movement began. And it began in New York, and then it went to San Francisco. And some of the persons who joined him were previously professional musicians, and now they became, not professional Hare Krishna people, but dedicated Hare Krishna people. And they opened doors so Prabhupada could get a mridanga, because when he came, he didn't have any instruments, didn't have a mridanga. But they, slowly, things started to develop. there's the audience, kind of a motley crew. And, one person who had become a bit of a follower, and the rest of people are the counterculture youth of his time. And that was his audience. And he's a refined gentleman. But, not disturbed by their roughness and their mannerisms and things. He had faith in the holy name, and he had faith in the message of Lord Chaitanya, which was, every town and village of the world, the chanting of my name will be heard. That's Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Here's some of the contributions. I'm going to stop here, I think. In the initial days, there was one entity. It was an ISKCON entity that was incorporated in the city of New York because he wanted a worldwide organization. So it was the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And then the book publication was under ISKCON Press, but then he spun it off thinking, if there's any problem, legal problem with ISKCON, it shouldn't have any difficulty with my intellectual property, my books. So he created a trust, a Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, or BBT, that in time became the world's largest publisher of books in India and Vedic religion in the world. And many, many, many books. Here you see some of the titles. In the course of his life, he printed and published 70 different volumes. And translated eventually into 80 different languages. Here's some of the languages. Major contribution of our founder Acharya was through his book publication. And this is the final slide. This is, in 11 years, he traveled around the world 12 times. His mission was to go to the English-speaking parts of the world, but after having accomplished that to some degree, he started going to Spanish-speaking, Russian-speaking. He didn't go to China. He sent somebody to China, but, all over the world. So the title of this, An Extraordinary Journey. So this is the kickoff subject of your theme for the semester. That's spiritual journey. That's the theme. What's to say the whole thing? The spiritualist's journey. Okay, so that's all of you. I salute you. May you have a happy journey. There'll probably be some bumps along the way. You probably have some distractions along the way. And it's probably not going to be a smooth ride, but it's probably going to be a lot easier than crossing the ocean at the age of 70. At the age of 70 to cross the ocean in a cargo ship. But have a happy journey. And I'm sure you'll learn some things, and I hope you'll get some support in understanding how to meet some of the challenges that you've come across. And I hope you also take lots of prasadam, because that's something very nice. So I'm done with my little talk. The Extraordinary Journal. So any discussion? We have a portable microphone if you want to discuss or add or inquire about something.
Can you explain again why Prabhupada felt unwillingly accepted it? Like that word unwillingly?
Yes.
I still didn't get it.
Okay. Your question is the same as the first question yesterday evening. To a different audience, somewhat modified presentation of this, but same question. So I like the question. Two main things. It's his natural humility. A person that's qualified isn't proud. See, the person is qualified, their heart is free from pride. So he was not feeling qualified. So it's his natural humility, reluctantly. And there may be a second reason. And the second reason is, why do the mission was given to me not as a sannyasi. This is me speaking, not Prabhupada speaking. But I have seen persons not so qualified because they're lacking in pridelessness. There's pride in their heart, and they want recognition with some title or position or something, including sannyas. Have you seen it? I've seen it. So, he wasn't like that. He didn't want recognition. He had a mission, and he can do the mission from any status. He was given the position as a householder with children and a business and and livelihood and all of that stuff. So, is it really necessary? But so he was reluctant because he was focused on his mission, and I don't need this for my mission. But he accepted it, despite he was on that track, because it was being insisted by someone who he knew was his well-wisher. And he accepted it was from his spiritual master. The reluctance is humility, and what's the necessity? So he had prioritized his necessities. He had to have the Bhagavatam, because that's what Bhaktisiddhanta did. To carry the message, books. So he was focused on the priority, and this wasn't for him a priority. So therefore reluctance. For example, some of our leaders in the Hare Krishna movement, they're householders. And it's just fine. They can be, spiritual leaders setting an example in the household ashram. Why there's not necessity to accept the sannyas order of life to be a spiritual leader. So, something like that. So, reluctance. Okay?
Maharaj, how was your first meeting with Prabhupada, and what was your feeling after that?
The first meeting, it wasn't really, there wasn't any exchange between us, one-to-one or something like that. I was just a college kid that didn't know nothing about nothing. Here was the circumstance. I'll describe the circumstance. And when I walked away, I didn't really know what had happened. I was passing through the student union, Norton Hall, and just going from one side of the student union to the other side to meet a friend that was living in one of the dormitories. And as I was passing through the ground floor of the student union, I saw a big crowd of people around the Millard Fillmore room, which was just like an assembly room. And I hadn't seen that before, so I was curious, what's going on? There's a bunch of people hanging around the door. So I wiggled my way through the crowd at the door. I went inside, and there I saw two people sitting on the stage. And one of them I recognized, Allen Ginsberg. Some of you are nodding. Some of you don't know who Allen Ginsberg is. He was a famous, or one might say infamous, American poet who was an advocate of LSD and wrote poetry on LSD. So it was like a stream of consciousness type of poetry. It was really wild. And he was, he read his poetry in different places and was a celebrity guy, with hair that went out like this. And so I recognized him when I saw him sitting on the stage. But the other person, I didn't know who that was. It was Prabhupada, the two of them, because Allen Ginsberg, in addition to liking LSD and liking poetry, he liked Mahamantra. He liked India. And so he was traveling with Prabhupada, visiting some universities in the eastern USA. And my university was one of them. And so my experience was they were chanting. I didn't know what the chanting was. I didn't know anything about anything. But I was mesmerized and stayed there for a while. The room was filled with smoke, and it wasn't cigarette smoke. And people bouncing off the walls and ceilings from LSD and everything else. That was the period of time. And the crowd that was attracted to Allen Ginsberg. And I listened. And then at the end, Prabhupada spoke very simply. I don't remember exactly, but I have come to remind you of what you've forgotten. Kind of simple message. You're not the body, you're spirit, soul. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2. And then invited everyone to come to the center on Englewood Avenue, which is across the street from the campus. And then that was it. So I left. So you want to know what my experience, what my reaction was, is I didn't understand what happened, but later I understood what happened. Something moved inside. That spiritual sound vibration had a spiritual impact on my heart. My spiritual journey got a big shot in the arm. And, things started to happen after that that were quite mysterious. Like doors that weren't there, all of a sudden the door was there, walk on through the door, and there's something spiritual on the other side of the door. Just by that exposure. The next time I was in Prabhupada's personal presence was about 2 years later, but a year and a half later. I had been living in an ashram at the Boston Temple, and then was asked if I could go to New York. So I was in New York, and I was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in New York about a year and a half later. But when I first saw him, I was in pre-med and go. Anyway, that's what happened to me. Different things happen to different people. That's what happened to me. Those are other things that happened. Anything else? Yes.
I had you just told us about the story that when Srila Prabhupada's typewriter got stolen, and all of his hard work just got stolen by someone.
A manuscript of Bhagavad Gita, unpublished.
Something that he worked on for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I understand he must have been really distraught.
No. I mean, he wasn't happy, but he wasn't destroyed. Someone who's situated transcendentally, read Bhagavad Gita. You read Bhagavad Gita, neither happiness nor distress. So all he did was he just did a new version. So he wasn't destroyed. That's not the emotion of a transcendentalist.
But perhaps emulating that into our own experience. So
you have to have that consciousness.
So is there any advice you would give when you just lose something that you worked on for so long? And
the advice is become attached to Krishna. Because if you're attached to that which is temporary, guess what? Suffering. And if you attach to that which is eternal, guess what? Happiness. That's who we are. If you be attached to who you really are, then there's not happiness and distress like in the material world. That's my advice. Pretty simple. Just become, to know who you are. And if you know who you are, unpack that, and you're part of something that's bigger than you. And something that's bigger than you is a person, supreme person, and so we're part of Krishna, and that's who you are. And when you have that, then you're okay. Duality, this is the world of duality. Sometimes there's a weather change going on right now in Chicago. It was roasting hot. Now it's not roasting hot. Wait a while. Those of you that are the first year here, wait a while. And it just says there's duality. It's summer and winter seasons. There's happiness and distress. There's honor and dishonor. It's right in Bhagavad Gita. So don't be attached to those things. You can acknowledge it. When it gets cold, you put a jacket on and do other stuff. When it's rainy, you get an umbrella. Or you may not. You may just walk. Anyway, you acknowledge the duality that's happening around you, but you're not identifying with it. So that's possible when you identify with who you really are. If you've forgotten who you really are, you identify with who you really aren't. And then there's happiness and distress because that's the duality thing. So there's a menu, reality or illusion. And then there's subsets of both. So my advice to you is take the right choice. For starters, go in the right direction. That's the spiritualist's journey. Go in that direction. You're here for a nice education. Fantastic. Go for it. And while you're going for it, put the right foot forward instead of the wrong foot forward. Because otherwise you're in for a rough ride. The happiness and distress, rough ride. You have something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you first met Prabhupada, you felt like nothing, or you really didn't know
I didn't know. I was in La La Land.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on.
So you told it is like a follow-up question. So you did see some kind of miracles or some kind of changes that were happening. So when was that you came into the consciousness that you are moving into spirituality or towards Krishna consciousness?
It was slow. No, not super slow, not snail slow, but it was gradual. It wasn't quantum things. The one quantum thing that I did that startled my family was I took a leave of absence from school. I was accepted to med school, and I took a leave of absence, and I didn't return. I could have returned. No one was telling me don't return.
Yeah.
But that was I would say in retrospect the only quantum thing that was people that knew me well and et cetera, thought was uncharacteristic because everything else was slow. I mean, snail, but slow, gradual. Things were evolving. My sense in retrospect is I just picked up where I left in my last life. And the catalyst that helped that happen were two things. This magazine, Bhaktisiddhanta magazine article, and from that then came other literatures, and then mantra, and Prabhupada. Three things. So, and then doors, as I mentioned, just a poetic way of describing it, doors that I didn't even know were there suddenly were there. And then I opened the door, and on the other side of the door was spirituality. Those were Krishna. I took it. Those were Krishna's arrangements. There was some sincerity and inquisitiveness. I'll give you an example. For example, one of the doors that happened that wasn't there before, after this first encounter with Prabhupada, is I had a philosophy professor. His name was George Boger, nice guy. I didn't know at the time, but later I came to know he was a Taoist. But he was just, nice. So we developed a relationship outside of class. We'd go into the cafeteria and have lunch together, and he introduced me to his wife, and he would sometimes read his poetry. And we went into the pottery room, and he explained, this helps me get centered, because you put a glob of clay and spin the wheel, and it helps me get centered, my energy. So it was teaching me, but not as a teacher, but as a friend. But someone who I looked up to. And in the course of time, he gave me a Bhagavad Gita. I couldn't even pronounce it. And I thought it was a book of poetry. So I was carrying it around along with my stack of books. And someone said, oh, I have one of those, but it's a different version. Here, take mine too. And I hadn't even read the first one. So then I said, hey, if there's two, there's probably more. I went to the library, and sure enough, there were 5 more versions of Bhagavad Gita. So I read all 7, and I came to 2 conclusions. Not a book of poetry. And the other is, I don't understand it. Some time passed. I got version number 8. So I started to read version number 8. And it was really easy to understand. I was puzzled. Why is this so easy to understand? And the other 7 I couldn't understand. But I liked it, so I kept reading it. And in the course of time, then it came to me, so this is the gradual, came to me, the approach, this is descending knowledge. There's Sanskrit terms, but it's descending knowledge as opposed to ascending knowledge. Ascending knowledge is likened to looking for the sun with a flashlight. That's not how you find the sun. The sun is self-luminous. It reveals itself. You don't need a flashlight. So scholarship is the ascending process. And this is the descending process. And therefore, with the descending process, it's easy to understand. I didn't know what was going on. It was just a doorway that opened up and like that. Just this thing, one thing, the next thing. And so what was behind that was I wanted to know. Inquisitive, Brahma Jigyasa. Some of you know a little Sanskrit. Tato Brahma Jigyasa. You heard it before. Ataha means now. Achieving this human form of life, Brahma, or the absolute truth, Jigyasa, one should inquire into the nature of the absolute. When you get the human form of life, that's your mission. Know who you are. And know what is Brahman. And then there's stages of realization of Brahman, and Para-Brahman, and Bhagavan. So stages of realization. So I did, anyway. Slowly. That's how it unfolded. One thing, the next thing, the next thing. I tried different types of meditation without going into the whole autobiography. There's lots of types of meditation. I was a kid that didn't know anything about anything, so I'm experimenting with meditation. And in short, after like 6 months of experimenting, I found mantra meditation was most powerful. And of the 5 mantras that I was chanting, I found the Hare Krishna mantra was most effective. So I stayed with it. So there are 3 things. Some general advice, like, know yourself. Swamiji, what's the perfection of life? To know yourself, to know who you are. And that's unpack that one, and you have lots of knowledge or wisdom. So here's another one. This is me, college kid. There's a higher reality. I have confidence. There's a higher reality. There's something more than this. And the second is I don't know what it is. And the third one is I want to know. That's it. And doors will appear. You walk through them, and what's on the other side? The spiritualist journey is on the other side. And it can happen right here on campus. Well, though you're here for XYZ purposes, there may be some other purposes. If that's what you're inquisitive, there's a higher reality. I know that I don't know, and I want to know. I was a rebellious kid. I don't want to take anybody's word for it. I mean, I felt I had been cheated. Here's how it happened. You like to ask me these personal questions. My parents were getting draft notices in the mail. The war in Vietnam was going on, and draft notices, there's a term for it, I forget the term for it. My draft number was 1A, means show up at the armed services, get your uniform, get on a plane, get over there to Vietnam and kill. And I thought, that's really dumb. The war is dumb, and you don't take somebody out of medical school to go fight a dumb war. It's double dumb. So I didn't respond. And they were like, you got to respond. They'll put you in jail. You got to do something. They didn't tell me what to do, but you got to do something. So I started asking around, what do you do when you get these dumb notices in the mail? I hadn't read it yet. They were sending it to my home, my parents' home. So I said, somebody said, you can fill out a conscientious objector form. And if you get an A in your exam, and I know how to get A in the exams, so you can have your draft status changed. So the first question was, state the nature of your belief such that you cannot take part in the armed forces of the United States of America. Piece of cake, right? You know how to answer questions, get A's in exams. But my pen wouldn't move. And we couldn't move because I didn't have an honest answer. And then a little light went on saying, what? I don't know what my convictions are. I don't know who I am. I can get A's in exams, but I don't know who I am. Something's wrong with that. Fundamentally wrong. And with that one question came 100 other questions that I didn't have answers to. So then I started the quest got real serious. And I was in a rebellious state. I felt I've been cheated. I bought into the program, and I was good at the program, but I didn't know who I am. Bad. I've been cheated. So I'm doing a timeout. I'm not just going to stay on this mindless machine where I don't know who I am and to be successful. Sorry. I don't mind being successful, but I want to know who I am. Please. That was the, rebelliousness. Kid. But I took it seriously. So with that serious inquisitiveness, along with all the other things I mentioned, and then this mysterious things started to happen. It was a nice journey. Okay. I think I should end. Is it okay? Can I end? It's time for a prasadam, right? You want to do some announcements? She's going to make the announcements. He's pointing to you. Huh? Okay.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for...
Turn the page around.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for addressing us. This is our first event. Thank you so much. The following announcements. Next week, next Friday, in fact, we have a welcome lunch during the lunch hour. The venue is still going to be decided, but it should most likely be in front of MTCC near the volleyball court or either Seagull Field. So we're still discussing that, but we'll let out an announcement for that. It will be during the lunch hour, so please invite your friends. And the same day in the evening, 7 to 9 p.m., we'll have our event, the weekly event for next week. And the last announcement is please scan. So we've put flyers everywhere. So please scan the QR codes and join the mailing list and the WhatsApp group so we can have future updates for events. Yeah, thank you.
I was a little worried when I first walked in and I was the only person here. But you're Indian, so it's, Indian Standard Time. But next time I come, know that I start on time. If you're late, it's okay, but I start on time. And I have some prasadam, Mahaprasadam from the temple, and you just, as I walk by, put out your right hand.